thank you for joining us for another episode of Got 10 Minutes. This week, I am with Angela Shaw, TEDx speaker, HR leader. We also have the past head of the Austin Human Resources Association. Absolutely love you. So excited to have you. And before we get started, I have one question. You got 10 minutes?
I do have 10 minutes, and I want it to be the best 10 minutes of our day.
It will be. It will be. So to get started, how about you tell our viewers a little bit about you?
Sure. So as you said, my name is Angela. The first thing I ever was good HR. So I'm good HR. I've been in HR for many years. I love HR. But that career has brought me to be able to do a lot of other things. So I'm a public speaker, as you mentioned, did a TEDx, and I've done a lot of public speaking over the last 3 years. I also am a self-appointed leader in the field. I love to mentor and talk to HR people because I want to introduce them to good HR too. So I love to be an example. I'm a supporter, I'm a connector, I'm a door opener. So just anything that I could do to help people.
That's awesome. And a passionate advocate and speaker on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's actually where I met you. So I thought it would be wonderful to have you on the show. And number one, just tell us, first of all, for our viewers, like, what is diversity, equity, and inclusion? Kind of what's the goal? And how you specifically got, excited and passionate about the subject.
Yeah, so I always describe myself as a DEI advocate. So I advocate for everybody. And I felt like I could not ask for anybody to be an ally unless I was an ally first. So I really tried to spend a lot of time educating myself about other people and their thoughts and feelings. So the diversity piece obviously is that we're different, whatever ways we're different. So whether that's cognitive, whether that's race, gender, those differences. The equity part is that we all have the same opportunity. And so how can I be a person that helps everyone receive the same opportunity? And then that inclusion piece is I get to be myself, but you also get to be yourself. We all get to sit at the table and we all feel welcomed at that table. So, for me, that's my definition of DEI. And I think I got involved in the space because as I tried to progress my career, I recognized that there were barriers out there. And as opposed to blaming other people, I wanted to figure out what power I had and how I used that power. And that's what really made me become an advocate. And so, again, I'm not just for Black women because I'm a Black woman. I'm for everybody. And so really, when I talk about DEI, when I have conversations with people, it's how, again, just we all receive that equitable opportunity.
All right, that's awesome. And, and I think in our first conversation, we even kind of had this whole talk about DEI and initiatives and all these other things. And it seems so big, right? Or also that any intervention I've ever seen has required the person in the minority to kind of have some sort of traumatic experience. So I thought we could talk about DEI kind of on a micro level and at an individual level and see if you have any suggestions for our viewers about things they can do, regardless of race, gender, any of those things, but just things we could do every day to move the needle forward when it comes to DEI.
So absolutely. And anybody who's seen me speak know that I always talk about activating your individual power. So everybody has power, but it's dormant until you activate it. It's something that you have to activate. And so when we talk about that individual smaller level, we're all leaders, we're all advocates for DEI, and how we activate our power shows that. So as little as making an introduction for an underrepresented person. So when we talk about equity and equal opportunity, the underrepresented don't have that. That includes me. So as I've not been introduced to people and not had opportunity, I try to set that example first. So every individual can do that. You can mentor, you can support, you can get people into rooms that they wouldn't be invited into. So whether that's for a scholarship for school, whether that's their application getting considered, whether that's them getting an interview, each one of us has the power to activate on that small of a level, right? So individually, what are we doing? my table's diverse, my group of friends is diverse. That makes my perspective diverse. That makes me more open to understanding somebody's different story. That in itself is activating your power. So those are all really small things that every individual person can do.
I remember hearing you speak and kind of talk about it's not helpful just to forward the email, right? Or to forward the person's resume, but making sure that, you either add a little bit extra or do a little bit extra to get them the phone call. I mean,
Yes.
there's only so far you can probably take things, but you can probably get to the phone call, right?
Yes.
And make that connection. I've actually carried that with me. So I just wanted to tell you that, and thank you, at least with a little bit of power, right? And access that I have. When someone asks me to do that, I always kind of hear you saying that, in my head. And I was like, okay, I need to take this one step or two steps further.
And I still do that, Harold. I do it as much as I can. I still do that.
Yeah, and it makes a difference. It really does. So I think those are great tips, that things that everyone can do. And now if we take it on like a macro level, right? So there's a lot of organizations that are talking about DEI initiatives, and like, how do we know if an organization's like getting it right? Are there any sort of indicators, that we've seen or that about that means like, at least they're trying or they're getting it right or better than other organizations?
Yeah, so it's something that the world has been working on forever. So I don't know if there's 100% definition of getting it right.
Yeah.
But I do know that there are organizations out there working towards trying to get it right. And even for all of the good stories that we hear, whether it's a Google or a Facebook, we still hear some bad stories too, which tells us that there's still so much work that needs to be done. So I think at that macro level, with it starting at the top with the C-suite, the CEO, a very simple, easy way. Their direct reports, are they diverse? Do they look diverse? Is the board diverse?
Yeah.
I mean, it's silly and we kind of laugh at it because you're like, oh my God, you should just know that. But we still don't see it at that level. So even in an organization where they're touting their initiatives, and we hear that a lot, we have ERGs, we're doing blind hiring, we have this software we're using. We hear it a lot, but at that level, are we seeing it? So simple. Got to see it first. So I think at that bigger level, that's how we know it's right. Do we see it first?
Yeah, and to your point, it's about action, right? And actually seeing the action, leaders setting examples, and like you were saying, not to compare it, but it's like, like they'll say, oh, it's okay to dress casual and wear jeans, but then the entire executive team is in suits every day, right? And it's like, oh yeah, we're going to work on diversity, equity, inclusion, but everyone's still white and male potentially.
Right.
So then, what do you think are some of like the top barriers to action in organizations?
Yeah, so I think for me, what I've seen, and as I've had conversations with people, and even being the head of HR in multiple organizations, it's the intentional part. Mm-hmm. It's the sustained being intentional about the action. So I think people start out good. Everybody starts out good. And you have your initiatives, and we have our employee resource groups, and we're all rah, 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 but it doesn't sustain and it's not intentional. So we're diverse and inclusive. But when we start having individual conversations with hiring managers about what that being intentional looks like, the response is, nobody has time for that. I don't have time to be intentional. Isn't that reverse discrimination? Oh, we're not going to hire for diversity's sake. We're not lowering the bar. Like all of these excuses about being intentional. Yeah. I think, that intentional piece, I think that's a barrier. People just have a hard time sustaining being intentional and doing the work that goes into being intentional. It's a huge barrier. I see it a lot.
And I would also add to that, like I've said before, I was like, if they told you that your job depended on having a diverse team, you'd probably have one like that and find ways to do it, right? So to your point, being intentional, absolutely, and the organization reinforcing it. So we're almost out of time, but will you tell, this has been great. It's only 10 minutes and it goes by so fast, and this is
a
bigger conversation, but can you tell everyone where they can find you and connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm all over LinkedIn. That's really pretty much my only form of social media. I'm very intentional about that and setting the example of how to professionally interact with people. But you can find me on LinkedIn, Angela L. Shaw. I did my TEDx videos there if you'd like to see it. Um, that's really where I'm at is on LinkedIn.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. We'll probably have to do part 2 so we can dig a little bit deeper into this, but I appreciate your 10 minutes today and thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.